1800 GMT, Gulf of Oman. A single squadron of carrier-based fighter jets crosses the coastline of southern Iran, and inside 6 hours the primary surveillance tower at Chabahar port folds into its own footprint. Back up to July 8, 2026. President Donald Trump declares the April bilateral ceasefire with Iran finished. That truce, signed on April 8, holds for exactly 3 months before it fractures completely. Within days, U.S. Central Command opens a targeted resumption of the air campaign, and the strikes fall night after night on a single category of target. Not command bunkers, not palaces, logistical nodes. The roads, the piers, the towers that let a navy move fuel, ammunition, and vehicles from the interior to the coast. No warehouse burns, no cargo pier vanishes. The deepwater trade route India and Iran spent 2 decades building simply goes blind, and the eyes that watch every hull entering that harbor close for good. Most analysts predict a different opening move. They expect American aircraft to hunt Iran's fast-attack missile boats and force open the Strait of Hormuz by sinking small, agile hulls in open water. That prediction misses the target by 40 miles. U.S. Navy aviation flies inland instead, past the coastline, past the ports, and drops precision-guided munitions on 6 concrete highway bridges. The question that follows defines this entire campaign. Why collapse bridges when the fleet is at sea? An early blow lands at Chabahar. On July 9th, Mohammed Saeed Arbabi, managing director of the Chabahar Free Zone organization, confirms an American airstrike damages the Maritime Traffic Control Tower and 2 marine piers, Shahid Beheshti and Kalantari. A control tower at a port performs the same job as an air traffic tower at an airport. It sequences arrivals, tracks vessel positions, and clears ships to dock. Remove it, and a deep-water harbor keeps its concrete but loses its ability to conduct traffic safely at scale. The port still exists. The port can no longer function as intended. That damage sets the pattern, but the decisive move waits until July 16th. At 1800 GMT, CENTCOM begins its 6th consecutive night of airstrikes across southern Iran. This is the night the campaign shifts from ports to pavement. American fighter jets strike and neutralize 6 critical bridges in Hormozgan Province, and every one of those spans feeds a supply corridor running toward Bandar Abbas, Iran's principal naval base. A coastal fortress bristling with defenses becomes an island. The ships stay in harbor. The reinforcements cannot reach them by road. If you're following how modern conflicts are actually decided, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next breakdown. Now, back to the campaign. Here is why concrete beats steel hulls in this calculation. A missile boat is a target you must find, track, and strike while it moves at 30 knots and shoots back. A bridge sits still. It carries a fixed load along a fixed line, and a single guided bomb dropped on the right span severs a route that thousands of trucks depend on. Strike the boats and Iran still resupplies from the interior. Strike the bridges and the boats run dry. Fuel, spare parts, missile reloads, all of it moves by truck across those spans, and trucks cannot swim. The precision itself relies on a targeting chain most viewers never see. A joint direct attack munition is a standard bomb fitted with a guidance kit, tail fins, and a receiver that steer the weapon toward a set of satellite coordinates. Think of it as the difference between throwing a dart blind and using GPS to walk to a specific front door. The pilot does not need to see the bridge through cloud or darkness. The aircraft feeds the coordinates, the fins adjust in flight, and the weapon lands within a few feet of the aim point. That accuracy is what lets one jet drop the center span of a bridge without flattening the village beside it. At 1:40 GMT on July 17th, CENTCOM concludes the precision strikes. The operational update lists the categories of forces involved, and the mix tells the story. Fighter jets for the bridges. Unmanned aerial systems, the drones that loiter overhead feeding live video and confirming battle damage, for surveillance and follow-up. Warships offshore for the maritime side of the operation. This is not an air raid. It is a combined arms squeeze, applied from 3 directions at once, and the land targets are only half of it. The other half floats in the Gulf of Oman. According to an unclassified operational update from CENTCOM, U.S. forces deploy standoff precision capabilities and specialized teams to control non-compliant merchant vessels attempting to run the blockade. A boarding team is exactly what it sounds like. Armed sailors cross from a warship to a merchant ship by small boat or helicopter, take the bridge, and redirect the vessel to a controlled port for inspection. During the initial phase of the blockade, Navy surface forces intercepted and redirected 3 commercial vessels that complied with the orders. While force is used when necessary, most compliance is achieved through the mere presence of a warship alongside a cargo hull. The mere presence of a warship alongside a cargo hull ends the argument. Enforcing a blockade at that scale demands people, and the numbers are heavy. Roughly 50,000 active U.S. service members currently deploy across the Middle East, with a portion of those forces holding the maritime cordon in place. That is not a patrol. That is a standing wall of hulls, radar, and boarding crews stretched across the approaches to the strait, positioned to stop any ship that ignores a hail. The message to global shipping is blunt: comply, or be boarded and redirected. Tehran feels the pressure and answers with a public relations move. Abbas, the same official who confirms the Chabahar damage, steps forward to project normalcy. He announces that despite the destroyed control tower, cargo handlers keep unloading stored vehicles from the remaining warehouses. The claim is technically true and strategically hollow. Unloading vehicles that already sit in a warehouse proves nothing about whether new ships can safely enter a harbor that no longer controls its own traffic. It is the sound of an operation insisting the lights are on while the eyes are shut. Washington answers the normalcy claim with an image. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth publishes a ground-level photograph of the collapsed Chabahar Tower on the platform X and attaches a single line of text: Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz. The picture does the arguing. A structure that stood days earlier now lies in rubble, time-stamped and geolocated, posted for a global audience to measure against Tehran's reassurances. In modern conflict, satellite imagery released within hours functions as its own weapon, because it removes the option of denial. On the ground in Hormozgan, the human cost arrives in an emergency broadcast. The provincial governor issues an urgent warning, pleading with local drivers to stay clear of the remains of the Garive Bridge while rescue vehicles search the rubble. That single detail reframes the entire operation. These bridges carry civilian traffic, and the collapse of a span is not an abstraction on a map. Iran's Ministry of Health reports 38 military and civilian fatalities since hostilities resumed on July 8, 2026. A figure that climbs as the strikes continue and rescue crews reach sites like Garive. The strategic logic is cold, but the ground beneath it holds people. Iran does not absorb the campaign without response. It launches fresh drone and missile attacks on Western-aligned facilities, targeting Sakhir Air Base in Bahrain and U.S. logistics centers in Kuwait. The choice of targets reveals Tehran's own thinking. It answers a logistics campaign with a logistics campaign, striking the supply hubs and airfields that keep American forces fed and armed. Both sides now fight the same war, aimed not at each other's frontline weapons but at the arteries that feed them. Break the supply line and the front line starves on its own. That mutual focus on logistics is what makes the bridge strategy so consequential. A navy is only as strong as its ability to resupply, and Bandar Abbas holds the bulk of Iran's naval striking power. Sealing it off by road while blockading it by sea creates a double isolation. The ships cannot sail out against thousands of deployed regional personnel and a wall of warships, and they cannot be reinforced from the interior because the 6 spans that carried their fuel and munitions lie broken across Hormozgan. A fortress that cannot receive supplies is no longer a fortress. It is a holding pen. The tactical lesson lands hard for every navy studying this campaign. The vulnerability of a modern fleet no longer lives only in its ships. It lives in the concrete and asphalt behind them, in the towers that guide their harbors and the bridges that feed their bases. A coastal power can armor its hulls, layer its air defenses, and mass its missile boats, yet still find itself paralyzed because an adversary reads the map differently and strikes the roads instead of the water. 6 bridges, 1 tower, 3 redirected ships. That is the actual scope of the campaign that isolates a naval hub over several months. The geopolitical stakes run straight through the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point that carries a large share of the world's seaborne oil. Whoever controls traffic through that passage holds sway over energy markets on 3 continents. Hegseth's caption is not bravado. It is a claim of control over the single most strategically loaded waterway on Earth, backed by imagery and by the interception of 3 ships that test the line and lose. For governments watching from Europe to East Asia, the operation is a live demonstration of who can open and close the tap. The strikes never aim to sink the fleet. They aim to make the fleet irrelevant, to leave every ship at Bandar Abbas fully intact and completely stranded, fueled by tanks that cannot be refilled, and armed with magazines that cannot be reloaded. Tehran prepares for a battle at sea, and instead loses a battle over pavement, stretching from the coast to nearly 200 miles inland, where the war is decided before a single warship leaves port. The most defended coastline in the region falls silent not because its weapons break, but because the roads that feed them do.